Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to England once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel a couple of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, a few different styles, but if people were to ask me about this brewery, I would say that they're probably best known for their different kinds of IPAs and also for their big imperial stouts. These are the two parts of the beer spectrum that I think these guys have cornered, if you like. But the beer we're going to have a look at today is one of their latest releases. I think this beer, though, might have been brewed before and it's been re-released, but it's a style that I know these guys can do very well, and it is supposed to be a very nice example of that style. And it will also be one of the stronger beers that I've had from these guys as well, if memory serves me correctly. So, needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to a little place called Hebdon Bridge, which is in Yorkshire, kind of to the northeast of Manchester and to the southwest of Leeds, if I remember correctly, and we're going to have a look then at another beer from Vocation Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called Neon Fog. It comes in at 11% ABV, and this one is a New England Hazy Imperial Triple, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So yeah, this beer, like I say, is a very highly rated one. I think it was about 4.3 or something like that. I had a little look at it on Untappd, and as I always say, take Untappd ratings with a bit of a pinch of salt, but usually they can give you a fairly good barometer of how good your beer is going to be. But I think this will be the strongest IPA that I've tried so far from Vocation, and it just kind of caught my eye because of the hop bill and the name of it. And this is another one that I purchased at the Caledonian Craft Beer Merchant over in Dunfermline. So I'll try to remember to put a link to their Facebook page in the video description below, and you can see what stuff they are getting in, because there's always a pretty good selection there. But yeah, definitely cool to return to Vocation, so let's crack on and see what this beer is going to have in store for us. As always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Vocation Brewery before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go down there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the English playlist along with a number of other things, and we will add to that as time goes on. We do have a few English beers to have a look at during this time when I'm at home as well, so very much looking forward to those. But check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Vocation Brewery once again then. So, Vocation Brewery, as I mentioned to you already, are based in Hebdon Bridge, which is about halfway between Manchester and Leeds. Like I say, it's, you know, Hebdon Bridge, Manchester is a little bit to the southwest, and Leeds is kind of to the northeast, and it's sort of just in the countryside. It looks very pretty when you look at the pictures. But anyway, the brewery was founded back in April of 2015 by John Hickling, and he had worked within IT in the banking sector for a number of years, and he also homebrewed as a hobby. But he grew tired of his working life and decided he wanted to run a brewery and, you know, basically turn professional with his hobby. So he went to train at Brew Lab in Sunderland in the northeast of England, and then worked for a period at Jarrow Brewery, and then he bought the equipment from Jarrow and founded Blue Monkey Brewery in Ilkeston along with his uncle back in 2008, and they successfully grew the business over the following years. But he sold Blue Monkey in 2007 and then founded Vocation because he felt that he needed a new project. So the new brewery opened in Hebdon Bridge in Yorkshire in 2015, and they started off with a 15-barrel brew plant, and they've grown their fermentation capacity over the last few years. But the brewery is apparently in a rebuilt chicken shed, and you know, they've just expanded this thing, they've upgraded their brew kit, and they've also developed quite an interesting barrel program as well. So these guys, like I say, have really kind of done a lot when it comes to IPAs and imperial stouts and things like this, so have a look at those. But they opened their first tap room in Hebdon Bridge in 2018, and then they opened another one in Leeds in 2019, but this closed unfortunately in 2022. But since opening the first one in Hebdon Bridge, they've opened other bars in Manchester in 2021, Halifax in 2022, and then Sheffield this year in 2023. But as of July 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 305 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and they will no doubt continue to increase that as time goes on. But yeah, these guys are a very recognisable English craft brewery these days, mainly because a number of their beers are available in like Marks and Spencer's and Tesco's and things like this. You know, it's a Love and Hate that's probably the best known one, and that is very good, I have to say. So you should go and have a little taste of that one if you get the chance, because it's really readily available. But yeah, they do have the kind of bigger and bolder things like this that go to your more artisanal craft beer shops, if we can say that. But yeah, that's everything I can really tell you about Vocation Brewery for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on then and actually have a little look at the beer itself. So as I mentioned to you earlier, this one comes in at 11% EBV, so it is a wee bit of a monster, but it's a New England Hazy Imperial Triple, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So yeah, this is the strongest IPA that I've had from Vocation so far. But there you can see the Vocation Brewery kind of symbol, if you like, on the top of the can there, and it tells you a wee bit about the beer just round here on the back. So like I said earlier, this one kind of caught my eye because of the hops in it. So this one has Citra, Sabro, Talus, Galaxy and Mosaic. All 5 of those are American beside Galaxy. So Citra's about 14% alpha acid. It's going to give you a lovely big kind of juicy mango note, and also a good little bit of lemon lime in a New England IPA. Sabro's about 14% alpha acid. It's got this very distinctive coconutty type quality, but also quite a lot of orange and a wee bit of pineapple. Talus is a daughter hop of Sabro. I think that's about 16% alpha acid if I remember correctly, and it gives you this kind of pink grapefruity type thing, but also some of the kind of coconutty notes that you'll get from Sabro as well. Mosaic, again, that's the last of the American ones. It's about 14% alpha acid, and it gives you this really distinctive tangerine orange as well, but also a wee touch of earthiness in the green component. And then Galaxies from Australia, it can give you a bit of grapefruit, but I find it's a bit more of a ripe passion fruit, big juicy kind of ripe mangoes, and also quite a little bit of pineapple too. So this one should be quite well balanced in terms of the citrus versus tropical type of things. I think I paid about £8 for this beer, if memory serves me correctly. You know, it was a bit of a treat, this one, I have to say, £8. But when it's a triple IPA and it's a brewery that I know are going to give me a good one, I'm not that bothered, to be honest with you. And it's, for me, it's a bit of a treat being home and being able to try some nice Scottish beers and have a go at a few English breweries as well. But yeah, the Neon Fog, 11% New England triple IPA. This should be pretty nice. Let's get this guy out into the glass and see how we go. There's just a little quick look at the artwork on this one for you again. But let's do this. Yeah, you can smell that already. This is going to be lovely. So yeah, a little bit of a technical brewing thing for you then. So obviously when it comes to pale ale, IPA, double IPA and barley wine, these beer styles are related to each other through their malt to hop ratios. But of course these days you have session IPA, triple IPA and quadruple IPA, which have kind of evolved out of these. So from what I understand, the technical brewing difference between a barley wine, which technically should be a triple IPA, and what is actually considered a triple IPA these days is the fact that what they do with triple IPAs is they'll take the double IPA hop to malt ratio and just basically put more malt in and make it more alcoholic but maintain the ratio. As far as I understand it, that's what they tend to do with these things. But yeah, the barley wine has a different hop to malt ratio than the double IPAs or the triple IPAs and the quadruple IPAs. That's what I've heard from brewers. The session IPA is the same idea. They take the IPA hop to malt ratio but put less malt in so it's less alcoholic. But yeah, that's how you get a session IPA. Pale ale, of course, has a different hop to malt ratio, and thus it's a different style. So a little bit of technical brewing jargon for you there so you can understand the exact difference between a triple IPA and a barley wine, of course. I have had that question before. But you can see that this beer has poured pretty much as you would expect of any New England IPA, regardless of whether it's single, double, triple session or whatever. So you can see that the beer poured with about a 2/3, 3/4 finger of you know, it's quite a frothy, I would say perfect white head there, but you can see some of the bubbles on the surface of the liquid are kind of medium. They're not too foamy, but it gets a little bit foamier the further up the head that you go. But you can see this beer is just fading away to give you a kind of thinner foamy layer toward the edge of the glass, bit of foam lingering in the middle of this one, which is quite interesting. And you can see that colour-wise and haze-wise it is what you'd expect. So for me, if I put the light through this one, the colour of this beer, it's like a very lightly amber, rich mango juice colour, this one. I always like comparing New England IPAs to different fruit juices because that's just what the appearance reminds me of. But yeah, remember the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging you do or adjuncts you put in will affect the colour of the beer as well, but you don't often have to care about that when it comes to New England IPAs, or any IPA for that matter, other than fruit IPAs. But yeah, certainly looks quite nice, this one. But in terms of the level of haze in this beer, which is of course down to the oak content, wheat content, and to a degree what yeast you use, this one isn't the soupiest and gloopiest of triple IPAs that I've come across, which is quite interesting. So yeah, I wonder if this one is going to be a little bit more. I think it's the oats that give you a wee bit more of the kind of haziness, if you like. So I wonder if this is going to be a slightly more wheaty New England triple IPA. But, you know, regardless, it certainly looks the part. You can see it's got that lovely haziness that you can expect of the style. One or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass and a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there. But as I say, it looks exactly as you'd expect from the style. Just a few little different things that's always interesting to think about. So yeah, I think we've said everything we need to about this one in terms of the appearance. Let's have a wee look at the aroma and see what it's all about. Yeah, I'm going to say straight away, Sabro and Talus jump out of this beer at you. They absolutely do. And this is a pretty fresh can, actually. I'm reviewing this one maybe 3 or 4 days after I bought it, and they got it in at the shop, you know, about a couple of days after it was canned, from what I understand, or just as it was released from the brewery, actually. They probably sit on the can for a wee bit just to let it mellow out, you know. If you drink New England IPAs too early, they can just be green. But yeah. But aroma-wise, this is really quite nice. It gives you everything you want. A bit of kind of the nice breadiness in there, some oaty, you know, kind of oaty creaminess. My first impression of this one is that it is actually a more wheaty and barley malt leaning New England. So that's one thing to think about. But the green component's nice and bright. You've got lovely juicy fruity notes to it. But yeah, like I say, the Sabro and the Talus and the kind of coconutty notes, the pina colada thing from Sabro really jump out of this beer for me. It doesn't say anything about when exactly they've used these hops in the whirlpool or as dry hops or whatever. But yeah, this is really quite interesting in that sense. But yeah, as I've said on the channel many a time before, for me there are kind of 6 elements to think about with the malty and yeasty side of these beers. So you can think about the kind of farmhousey yeasty character, the rye leaning grainy side of things. Those are a bit more prominent in American brewed New Englands because that's how the style used to be, basically farmhouse IPAs. Alchemist Brewing, Hill Farmstead, Lawson's Finest Liquids can be used as references for that. But yeah, then you've also got the wheaty bitiness, the oaty creaminess, the barley malt bread, and the sweet component too. And those 4 components are a bit more, you know, they are in any New England IPA you're going to find these. But these 4 are where the European brewed variants tended to start off actually. So for me, the first impression of this beer was that it's quite wheaty and quite barley malt leaning. So yeah, that's one thing to note about this beer. But you do get a little bit of wheaty character, a little bit of an oaty note out of this one too. But what we'll do is we'll break down the aroma and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth. So for me, the backbone of this beer, you absolutely have a little bit of that fresh white bready bread crust. There's a wee touch of like woodiness to this one. I'm not really getting cracker out of this one. Like, you quite often get a bit of Jacob's cream cracker, but I don't really get that out of this particular beer. This one has got quite a lot of like fluffy white bready character to it, but it smells like quite a dense bread at the same time. Maybe just a little touch of a kind of wholemeal brown bready character to it. But you can smell the wheat in this one for sure. and the wheat's actually quite smooth, but I think the density of the bread you get in this one is because of the presence of the wheat. I've always found that wheat has that kind of effect on the beer. It will densify the beer out, but you don't get too much bitiness out of the wheat in this one actually, so I'd be curious to know what variety they've used. Maybe they've used a little bit of spelt or something like that, or torrefied wheat. But yeah, because it's got a bit more dryness to it as well. So yeah, there's a teeny bit of that bitiness in the back of the nose, but really not a lot. But then you can smell that the wheat is kind of densifying that white bready character. Now the oaty notes in this one are interesting because they're actually quite dry in a sense. And for me, oats are quite interesting in New England IPAs because they can often give you an indicator of how fresh your New England your IPA actually is going to be. You know, essentially, the creamier they smell, the fresher the beer is. The drier they smell, the older the beer is. That's the gist of it. But yeah, with this one, it has that kind of. I had an oat cream New England IPA from Overtone the other day, and the aroma that you get out of this one actually reminds me of that. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a wee bit of oat cream being used in this one actually, because it smells very similar. The other thing is, you do get a wee bit of dryness out of the oats in this beer the more that you smell of it, but it's really interesting in that sense that I'm getting, you know, creaminess and dryness out of this beer. So yeah. But on the sweet side of things, there's not too much to report there. There is a little bit of a more kind of Werther's original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing going on. And then, yeah, you have like a little bit of, there's a little bit of Werther's original butterscotchy, butter candy kind of thing going on with this one. But not too much. The beer doesn't smell overly sweet in the malt base. But I think that's everything we need to say about the malty and yeasty side of the beer. So, yeah, really interesting in that sense, actually. Yeah. I think we can go on to the green component with this one then. So for me, the green component is very bright, and as I've explained in many IPA reviews before, there are 3 different kinds of hoppings that you can do if you use a 90-minute wort boil as your model. You have early addition hopping, which takes place in the first hour of the wort boil. That gives you mainly bitterness, and it translates to a deeper and danker flavour and aroma. Late addition hopping within the last half hour of the wort boil, that gives you quite a bright green component, you know, brighter floral aromaticity and so on, but it gives you a wee bit of bitterness and mainly flavour and aroma. Dry hopping, which takes place after the wort boil is complete, is all about the flavour and aroma actually. So yeah, and again that translates to quite a deep, quite a bright green component in flavour and aroma. But yeah, New England IPAs tend to rely on late addition and dry hopping. West Coast IPAs use early addition hopping, which is why they have that deeper, danker aroma. But they use all 3, but the early addition hopping tends to dominate aroma and flavour wise over late addition hopping, at least in when it comes to the green component of the beer. But yeah, you can tell with this one a lot of late addition and dry hopping going on here. But yeah, there's a wee bit of earthiness to this one for sure, but not too much. The main component of the green side of things in here is a very bright floral aromaticity. There's a good little bit of a kind of zesty, grassy character going on as well. And yeah, the way that this beer goes together in that sense, I think, is really, really nice. So it gets a thumbs up from me. Yeah, you know, aroma-wise, this is pretty damn interesting in that sense. On the fruity side of things, as I said, the Sabro and the Talus kind of jump out of this one at you, but behind that you do get quite a little bit of a quite pungent passion fruit, of course, which is going to come from both Citra and Galaxy. Quite a bit of ripe mango, again from the same 2 hops. A lot of pineapple, so Sabro is going to contribute a little bit to that as well. But yeah, I think Sabro and Galaxy will be the ones giving you that. But then yeah, lots of coconut, both from the Talus and the a bit from the Talus and from the Sabro in there, but a lot of orange, mainly from the Sabro and the Mosaic too. The thing that's surprising me is that it takes a wee bit of time. There is this little bit of a kind of bright pink grapefruity note out of this one, which comes from the Talus. It's very distinctive actually, but it takes a wee bit of time to show its head. But the fruity character in this beer, the Talus and the Sabro, I think really dominate this one. So I'd be really curious to see the brew sheet for this beer and see exactly how they've kind of put the things in it. So yeah, lots of geeky stuff in this beer that's making me think, and that's one of the things I like about Vocation Brewery, is they'll always play around with things and do things quite inventively. So yeah, I think this could be quite interesting. So as I always say, take a bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I think it is about time for us to have a taste of this and see what it's all about. So yeah, this one is the Neon Fog, an 11% New England Hazy Imperial Triple, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Vocation Brewery in Hebdon Bridge in Yorkshire down in England. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah, that is pretty damn nice. Yeah, first impression of this beer. Lovely, big, bright juiciness to it. The green component, I have to say, is pretty awesome. So yeah, lovely, big, bright green component to this one. It does actually come across a lot more oaty in the flavour than it does in the aroma, to be honest with you, so that's quite interesting. But yeah, this one, the malt base I'd say is quite different from what you're picking up in the aroma of the beer, but the fruits and the green component are pretty much what you'd expect, to be honest with you. But another lovely beer from Vocation Brewery. I do remember their beers actually being quite smooth and kind of oaty leaning, so in some ways it's a bit of a surprise when I think about the beer individually, but having a bit of experience of the brewery, it's not so much of a surprise. So yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, let's try and break this beer down then and just describe the flavour for you a wee bit more in depth then. Middle third of the palate, as we always start with. So, the backbone of that middle third of your palate then, you can feel a lovely little bit of a kind of fresh, it's almost a little bit like a more wholemeal brown bready crust that you get out of this one. So yeah, a bit more of a wholemeal brown bready bread crust form in the base of the beer. Further forward on that middle third of your palate, you get a little bit more of a kind of woody, yeah, you get a little bit more of a kind of woody character coming out of this one, which is interesting. And then there's a wee touch of like Jacob's cream cracker in there. So yeah, the way that that goes together is really quite interesting. But yeah, above that, as I say, a little bit of Jacob's cream cracker, and you've got a bit of a wholemeal brown bready layer actually forming the backbone of this beer. And what you'll find with this one is that you do get a little bit more of that kind of brown bready character the further into the aftertaste that you go. So yeah, wasn't quite expecting that from the you know, when I think about what the aroma was like. So yeah, that's an interesting point. So on the above the kind of wholemeal brown bready layer, you start to get the more white bready character coming out of this beer, and in some sense it's actually got quite a little bit of density to it. The white bready layers, it's kind of airy on one side, but the actual bready part of it's really quite dense. So for me, that's pretty interesting, I have to say. So above that, you start to, above the white bready layer, you can feel the wheat in there, and the wheat adds this kind of smoothness and density on top of all of that. So that's quite interesting as well. But then above the above the kind of the wheaty layer, you start to get the oats, and I do really wonder if there's been a little bit, pardon me, of like oat cream or torrefied oat or something like that put in this, because the oaty character is really dense and almost kind of like a paste or something like that. So you can feel it's almost like this oaty, this creamy like oat milk pasty type thing that sits there. So if you go down the middle line of your tongue, the oats are like really quite creamy, but then as you move out toward the edges of that middle third of your palate, they do show a good little bit of dryness there. But in the dead centre of your palate, you can feel there's a nice little you've got that little concentration there in the dead centre of your palate, where you get that kind of Werther's original butter candy, butterscotch type note coming out of the beer, and that, I have to say, is really quite nice. So yeah, I do like how that pieces together in this beer. So that gets a thumbs up from me. Actually, the malty side of this beer is quite interesting and quite different to what I was expecting out of this one. So yeah, just a little touch of that kind of Werther's original butter candy, butterscotch sweetness in the dead centre of your palate, and that's where you get the that's where you get the more how would we say, that's where you get the more the alcohol in this beer just being covered up a little bit. So yeah, you can feel that in the middle third of your palate with this one, so I think that's really quite interesting. But yeah, interesting how all that pieces together. But that's the middle third of the palate covered in this one. Let's go to the back third of the palate. So as I always say, remember, more sweet flavours come out further forward on the palate, more dry and bitter flavours tend to come out further back. So yeah, the back third of the palate is always going to give you similar flavours to the middle third, but just at different intensities. So in that border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of bready build-up in there, a little bit of brown bread, a little bit of white bread, but then the base of that back third of the palate, you've got a little bit more of, you can feel the kind of brown bready bread crust in there, which feels a little bit drier and things. Then you've got the cracker there, which again feels a little bit drier. The wholemeal brown bread is there, which feels a little bit lighter and more airy. Then above that you get the fluffy white bready layer, which again feels a bit lighter and more airy. And you can feel a little bit of the kind of wheaty character, just a little bit of the wheaty note just creeping over the top of that. And the wheaty note on the back third of the palate gives you that wee bit of kind of bitiness and things. So yeah, the way that that goes together is really quite interesting. But above all of that, you start to get some of the kind of yeasty note out of the beer. So yeah, let's focus on that yeasty character just a second. So yeah, the yeasty side of the beer, in this case, it's quite sort of, it's got a little bit of a more kind of farmhousey, like crackery, woody, white bready character to it, and it's almost just like it's wrapped in honeycomb or something. I always get a little bit of honeycomb on the back third of the palate in these beers for some reason. I always get a little bit of that with the kind of yeasty character of the beer, but definitely you can feel the flavour on that back third of your palate is a lot taller. Then as you move further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, the way this beer goes together in that sense is really quite nice. Yeah, I like how that pieces together for sure. So on the hoppy side of things with this beer, then we'll have a wee look at that. In the back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness in there. So yeah, a lovely little bit of earthiness there in the back corners of the palate. As you move further forward, it's a little touch kind of herbal, I would say. It's a little bit earthy, a little bit herbal, and as you push further forward toward the front corners of your palate, it gives you that more kind of bright floral aromatic sort of thing. So that, I have to say, is also quite nice. But round the front curve of your tongue, you can feel the beer does get a little bit lighter and a wee bit more grassy and things. But yeah, the green component for me overall is actually quite smooth and not too pungent, I would say. So yeah, interesting from that perspective too. But let's have a wee look at the front third of your palate then, and the kind of fruity side of the beer. So border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get that little bit of kind of bready build up in there, a little bit of brown bread in the base and a bit of white bread above that, and the base of that front third of your palate, you've got a lovely little bit of bread crusty character in there. Then on top of that, there's a little bit more of a brown bready note and some white bread, and you can feel a little bit of the wheaty smoothness there too. And then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out the beer. So let's focus on that. So, the fruity side of the beer in this one, it's got a nice little bit of, it's got a nice, at the back of that front third of your palate, you do you get a little teeny bit of that pink grapefruity thing from the talus. But yeah, as you move, that's very minimal, I would say. But as you move further forward, you get a bit of regular passion fruit. Then you start to get the big, juicy, ripe mango from the Galaxy and the Citra. And as you reach the middle of that front third of your palate, you're getting more of a kind of pineapple note. But you can feel, as soon as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, you can feel the coconut from the talus and the sabro just kind of sitting underneath. And there's this oily, tangerine orange from the sabro and the mosaic just sitting on top there. So the fruity character in this beer, to be quite honest with you, knowing these hops, is pretty much what I expected, but the coconut flavour really lingers into the aftertaste, and the kind of oat creamy sort of thing comes out of this beer too. So yeah, this is quite an interesting one. As I say, it strikes me as being like a kind of oat cream IPA, so I'd be curious to know, as I say, I'd be curious to see what the brew sheet for this one is, but it's certainly an interesting beer, we can say that with certainty. So, yeah, the way that this beer goes about its business is really, it's really very nice and quite interesting. The fruitiness is lovely. It's kind of a mix of oily and juicy at the same time. It gets a bit more oily the more that you drink of the beer, in fairness to it as well. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for the flavour section in this beer, to be honest with you. So let's round off with a wee look at the mouthfeel. For me, it's certainly not one of the thicker New England triple IPAs that I've come across, but I would certainly place it at the top end of mid-bodied. The carbonation in this one is very, very smooth, and it has a bit more of a kind of, it's got a bit of creaminess to it, but it's actually a more kind of oily and slightly slick New England IPA. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together in that sense is quite nice. In terms of IBUs, I don't really find this one that bitter at all, to be honest with you. I think 50 IBUs is probably around where it's kind of sitting. Yeah, around, as I say, around kind of 50 IBUs is where I would tend to place this beer. But the could be 60, I would say, but yeah, 50 seems a little bit more appropriate for this one. The malt base, as we said, has a little bit of graininess to it, a little bit of kind of dryness in there, some smoothness as well, and just a wee touch of sweetness. As I say, it strikes me as being like a kind of oat creamy, and it's quite a dense malt base that you get out of this one. The green component, as we said, leans toward that brighter floral side of things. A little bit of zestiness too, and the fruity character as well is a mix of tropical and more kind of citrusy orange. It's really nice how it pieces together, actually, this beer. A really interesting kind of concoction, this one, and it does give you that little hit, you know, to let you know that it's a New England triple IPA. So I have to say that's a plus point for this one. So yeah, interesting stuff from Vocation, this one, and definitely nice to return to these guys again after quite some time. And like I say, I'm going to need to keep that in mind, that these guys are a more oaty, creamy leaning New England IPA brewery. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. So yeah, this was the Neon Fog, an 11% New England Hazy Imperial Triple, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Vocation Brewery in Hebdon Bridge in Yorkshire down in England. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Vocation Brewery as well, and we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the very near future. But until then, Slanger just now, check out my social media, check out their social media, and I'll see you guys in the next review. This was the Neon Fog, an 11% New England triple IPA from Vocation Brewery. Slàinte, skål, and cheers.